Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. More rotation questions, including Jared Vanderbilt versus Taurean Prince. Who gets the minutes? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, all through the summer. No matter how or where you get your podcast, it's always going to be free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with over 20,000 other subscribers to the channel, all of whom leaving comments, talking to us, talking to each other. We actually plan on using a couple of the comments that we've seen over the last few days for today's show. We're going to wrap that in there. Please keep leaving us questions and comments and things to discuss, particularly now. It's a great way to, kind of get into Lakers topics that we know you guys want to talk about. So we really appreciate that. We spent a lot, Andy, of Thursday's show talking about different aspects of the rotation. We talked about the point guard situation with D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent. We talked about Anthony Davis playing the 4 or the 5 and what that does for Jaxson Hayes. One thing we didn't get into, and this, of course, prompted by a piece from Jovan Buha at The Athletic, kind of breaking down minute by minute what the rotation could look like. One thing we didn't get into was the backup forward setup, because I think this is one of the more fascinating areas that Darvin Ham's going to have to sort out between Jared Vanderbilt, Taurean Prince, Max Christie. Depends on how many minutes Rui Hachimura plays, how many minutes you want LeBron to play, and how they want to limit that. So many factors go into this. I think it's one of the most interesting spots on the team.
Well, before, Brian, we even get into that, I have to issue a correction and retraction to Thursday's show. In talking about D'Angelo Russell, his appearance on the Patrick Beverley's on the Pat Bev podcast, Patrick Beverley's show, he had talked about the differences in leadership, playing with Kobe versus playing with LeBron, and just sort of the vibe both put out there, which got me thinking about all the guys who had played with both Kobe and LeBron. And I went on a quest to try to figure out everybody who was on that list. However, I limited my quest to a 5-minute scroll through Basketball Reference. And as it turns out, sometimes these quests take a little bit longer. And there were a few people that I left off the list. I really appreciate, actually, a lot of our followers on Twitter at Cam Brothers or X or whatever the hell you want to call it, pointing out some of the people that I had missed. They include Jason Capono, Kent Bazemore, Trevor Ariza. I think I was just blocking the 2022 season out of my mind because those are both two pretty recent and obvious guys. Trevor Ariza was a starter on the 2009 championship team. I think I just didn't want to think about the 2022 season anymore because
the 2022 season still hasn't started because Trevor Ariza hasn't returned.
It was hellish. Kobe Carl played like a handful of games on the Cavaliers and was on the 2008 Lakers. And then this is somebody on Twitter, I apologize that I can't remember who it was, amazing poll, because I did not even notice this person's name on the list, and I don't think I would have even noticed it on rosters. Trey Johnson, who played a grand total of 23 NBA games, period, somehow managed to have those 23 games sync up to where he played with both Kobe and LeBron. That's amazing.
When did I don't even remember who that is.
Trey Johnson was, I want to say, on the 2011 Lakers, either 2011 or 2012, and he played in some incarnation of Cleveland. I
have no memory of that person.
I remember Trey. I remember him on the Lakers. I have no memory whatsoever of him ever playing with LeBron. But that's amazing that you would manage to have that few career games and somehow play with two of the all-time.
He played one game. That counts. He played one game with the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
One. in the 2010-2011. You can forgive me then for forgetting who this guy is.
We did cover those teams very closely.
He averaged 6 points in that one game. He shot 67% from the floor. This is a pretty good game. Got in there for 13 minutes. But you're right. There is something kind of statistically amazing about being able to say, I played 23 games in the NBA, but managed to play with both LeBron and Kobe. So
pretty amazing.
That is kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So now I believe that is the entire list, counting all the guys I listed on Thursday.
Well, thank you, Andy, for setting the record straight, because all the Capono stands out there, the Trey Johnson stands, the Kobe Carl stands. I don't want them coming at me on social. So I appreciate that. Let's get back. You know what? Let's get back. Yeah, we'll do it this way. Let's get back to the question though, because like I said, this forward spot and how you start, because you said for Thursday's show, I have it slated in this way. I think most people tend to. I know, Jovan in his story for The Athletic has Rui Hachimura as a starter.
Most people,
you're not even 100% sure sold. I mean, I'm not 100%, but you're not maybe even as sold as I am that that's probably what they're going to start the season doing.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm not sold that it's probably what they won't do. What I'm not sold on is that it's the obvious thing they have to do. I've heard a lot of people talk about the idea that, you're paying Rui $17 million a year. He's on a 3-year deal. That type of investment necessitates or mandates that he would start. My opinion is that it shouldn't. You're looking to get $17 million worth of production out of Rui. That doesn't mean it has to be as part of the starting five. To me, you just need to get $17 million of production out of him. And in particular, floor combinations can often be more important than who starts. And I think you can make an argument that Rui playing alongside LeBron, AD, Austin Reaves, and I presume D'Angelo Russell in the starting five, you don't actually get as much out of him in terms of his specific skill set, and one of his biggest is scoring, as you would playing him off the bench, one of the first subs in, as one of the focal points of that unit. I think you get a little more flexibility playing him off the bench in terms of the way you can sub out both LeBron and AD. Plus, I think you offer up more of an opening for minutes for either Taurean Prince or Jared Vanderbilt, and a little more utility playing Rui off the bench and having one of those guys start the game, probably one of the first subs out.
There is something I think to be said for that, because a lot of Rui's production came next to LeBron. And if you want to be able to kind of maximize that, those moments when LeBron and AD aren't on the floor together, AD is off the floor, LeBron is on the floor. Obviously, you want a little bit of scoring to go with LeBron. You want an outlet there, somebody who can step out and hit a three, which hopefully Hachimura does consistently throughout the season, but also somebody who is willing to take create and take a shot themselves. Those two worked really well together as the season went on, and you do get less of that when Rui is sharing. The point is, and I've long agreed with you on this, starting is the wrong place to look. It's minutes. Like you say, $17 million of value is 25 to 30 minutes a night. If he plays less than that, you start to scratch your head a little bit, but that can come later in the game. Is he finishing games? That could be important, but even then, that's not the only gauge of whether or not you're getting the right amount of value out of a guy. Let's keep talking about this, because the Prince Vanderbilt question is one that's really interesting as well. We talked about it a little bit after our scouting reports, but for people who might have missed those shows, or regardless, who gets on the floor between those two guys, I think is kind of a fascinating question. So they're both going to play, but how much? We'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Ibotta, and if you're picking up some burgers or dogs for a summer barbecue, get some cash back for it with Ibotta. It's summer right now. School is coming up soon. You want to get your kids some of that new school wardrobe, but get some cash back with Ibotta. Last minute vacation before school begins with the kids, but you don't want to buy all the stuff before you take off. Stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything in return using Ibotta. You're already spending the money, so get some cash back for your troubles. Just enter your loyalty link or upload your receipt after your shopping and you get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year in real cash back. Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points that, let's be honest, nobody ever uses. It's too complicated. It's too much of a chore. And you get real cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use that code LOCKED, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store. And again, use the code LOCKED.
I am not 100% sure how the Lakers deploy Jared Vanderbilt this year. I think he is one of the more he is probably, of all the sort of frontline players the Lakers have, and guys that you look at and say, okay, of course that guy is going to be in the rotation. He is the one that is potentially most likely to get a little bit squeezed, depending on floor combinations. If his, particularly if his shooting hasn't picked up, there are a lot of people who sort of hope that he believe he could kind of develop into more of a shooter. I think he has tremendous value as a regular season player and potential value depending on the matchup in the playoffs. I'm a big fan of him, particularly at what they're paying him. But Taurean Prince, who has some of the same defensive skill set, not identical, but some, biggest deficiency between the two of them is rebounding.
And he's not as good. He's not as good at guarding guards. He's not as good of a point of attack defender. They're different styles of defenders. They
are, but at the very least, you are putting a guy when you have Prince on the floor, it's not a offense or defense kind of thing. Like, Vanderbilt's your defensive guy. Prince is your offensive guy. Prince can play a little bit of defense.
Yeah, he can. I think Vanderbilt is a better overall defender than Prince.
That's probably fair.
Prince is not a defensive liability,
particularly when you factor in rebounding, which obviously is a part of defense. The floor spacing ability of Taurean Prince as a backup forward, in terms of balancing out the rotation, I think is going to be critically important this year, particularly if Hachimura isn't playoff Rui and is more regular season Rui in terms of his efficiency from 3-point range, more of what he's been over the course of his professional career throughout the regular season, which is lower in the 30s versus what he was in the playoffs. I think the Lakers are going to really need the floor spacing of Taurean Prince. This is another reason, Andy, that when we talked yesterday about why it doesn't make sense for the Lakers to start Anthony Davis at the 4. When you do that, you are really starting to squeeze how you can get these guys on the floor. And depending on the combinations, there could be times when, the Lakers need the floor spacing and Vanderbilt has a little more trouble playing, or it's an interesting problem, I think, for Darvin to sort out.
Yeah, I mean, one way or another, I just find the idea of Anthony Davis spending serious time at the 4, it's folly. I mean, it's something that I know he wants to hear. I'm sure it's something they'd like to see happen. If nothing else, it could be a good recruitment tool for whoever you're trying to get for that 14th spot, whether it's Christian Wood, Bismack Biyombo, just throwing out the idea that maybe you could end up a starter alongside Anthony Davis. I just think it's going to be really difficult to pull off because I don't think the rest of the roster is there to make it happen. Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting, though, between Vanderbilt and Prince, first of all, I think Prince could be a potential option starting at the 3.
Great.
Because he is a 3-and-D option, somebody that could be there just to space the floor, to try to do as much dirty work as he's capable of, and
very low usage too as an offensive player.
And if nothing else, you could potentially put him on, you could start him on a small forward that you don't want to have to put LeBron on if it's somebody that's more of a ball handler, and take some of that load off of LeBron. I also think, though, Jared Vanderbilt could potentially be a starting option if there's enough shooting / spacing just / scoring out there. Like, I think sometimes we get too caught up just in the idea of spacing, and like spacing is everything. A lot of it, I think, is, do you have to occupy guys? You know, are you occupying defenders? Do they have to pay attention to you? And if there's enough happening out there, we saw that in the regular season, there were ways that having Jared Vanderbilt out on the floor with the other starters, despite his lack of shooting, was tenable, particularly when he would often use that lack of gravity as a weapon and capitalize on people not paying attention to him. He did more off-ball cutting. I think that became more difficult to do when other guys started not making shots, and you just had less guys to pay attention to, period, and the space started collapsing that way. But Jared Vanderbilt, though, also, in addition to taking that assignment that you don't want LeBron to take in the first 5, he also allows more flexibility in terms of how you want to utilize Austin Reaves and D'Angelo Russell defensively as well. Like, Jared Vanderbilt gives you, if you start him, he gives you the most, I think, optionality in terms of what you want to do defensively than any of the options between Rui, him, and Taurean Prince.
Your point, I mean, this is something that, I think we've talked about a lot and try to emphasize. Like, you can get away with one guy, that kind of collapses. Just it is not, with the Lakers offense, when you want to preserve your two best players, when you want to kind of get through, like, I understand you got to build a defensive identity. I understand, like, you don't want to have to grind your way just by playing defense through 82 games. You need to be able to win some games with offense where you can, wouldn't it be great if we played a little better defense, but let's outscore a team from here to there, because mentally it's a little less taxing, and physically it's easier. It's going to really matter, like this notion. Like, people call Gabe Vincent a 3-and-D guard, and I object to the framing. I agree with the D part, but he's not a 3. He's not been a good. He could be, but he's, to this point in his career, not been a consistent 3-point shooter. Rui Hachimura has, to this point in his career, not been a consistent 3-point shooter. He had great playoffs, but he hasn't been that guy. They need Austin Reaves, last year's version of shooting, to be the guy that he is. If he reverts to something closer to his rookie season, that's problematic. They'll still get plenty of value from him, but from an offensive standpoint, they need that, because you're trying to make life easier for LeBron. You're trying to make life easier for AD. The more you can spread the floor, make shots, let LeBron penetrate a little bit and kick, stuff like that, and not have to finish at the rim, the better off you're going to be. So, I think you're right. I think the ability of Vanderbilt to pile up maybe more minutes than people might expect, and if it's 22 or 23 a night or 20 a night for Prince, and 14 to 17 right now, if you're kind of penciling in for Vanderbilt, to maybe bump those Vanderbilt minutes up, it does get easier if Christie comes in and is a viable 3-and-D guy who can hit 37%.
I also think it could become potentially easier just to get more run for both of them if Rui's coming off the bench. Like, I think in a lot of ways, Rui coming off the bench unlocks more possibilities. And again, I think actually in the long run could give you more of what you want from him, because, Rui made real defensive strides when he was with the Lakers. And I think they found good ways to use him. He did really good work against the Grizzlies. He worked his ass off defending Jokic, and if nothing else, was more effective, I think, against him, than anybody would have reasonably expected. But he's also not a real proven option guarding small forwards. And what we saw against Golden State is, the smaller the guy that you ask Rui to guard, often the less effective he becomes. More often that guy starts running around through screens. You have to navigate
the chasing aspect is a real problem.
Which, again, makes me think that there could be legitimate reasons to try to start either Prince or Vanderbilt, on a bunch of different fronts. It's not a given, and I understand why people expect it to be Rui, and it makes sense. I don't think that it's just a lock.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I agree that, it's really a question of how many minutes you're getting out of them. But I will say, like, when you start to look at these things and you kind of break it down, and the balance on this year's roster with this year's rotation is so much better than what they had, I think, going into last year. You look at it, well, who are your point guards? Well, you have, Gabe Vincent and D'Angelo Russell, and obviously Jalen Hood-Schifino's in there too, but I'm sort of thinking of him more as a development guy for now. But, those are two guys who can play together, because Russell is fully capable of sliding over to essentially what amounts to a 2-guard spot. You have Austin Reaves, who can run a point kind of position for you, but slots in nicely as a 2 and can also play the 3. And you have Taurean Prince, who's got a natural 3-4 and a small ball 5 in Vanderbilt, who can also play the 4 but guard down in terms of his position. There's nice overlap up and down the roster and what these guys can do.
Speaking of Vanderbilt, have you heard this internet rumor, and somebody found a photo that started all this, that he grew over the summer? I have not seen this photo, but I've heard it discussed. And if I'm understanding all
I'm
this
not buying that.
I'm not either.
Jared, how old is Jared Vanderbilt?
He's 24.
24-year-olds do not get taller.
I tend to agree with you, but
second.
I've heard discussed a lot, or seen discussed on the Twitter, on the X, and I've heard it discussed on podcasts. There's apparently, and I've not seen this photo, so I am not in any way saying that it's valid or saying that it's real, anything. But there's apparently a photo from an off-season workout with Vanderbilt and Rui together, and Vanderbilt is taller than Rui. He looks considerably taller.
I'm sorry. Rui. I've seen enough Peter Jackson movies to know what you can do or what perspective and stuff can do. I'm not buying that. The internet says it's very, very, very difficult to get taller at 24.
Look, man, I understand that. I'm just saying it's going around. You can find it on YouTube. It is going around Twitter.
I'm not
going around. Brian,
I will look it. I will look it up. Reddit. I will use the weekend, Andy, and this is what I will look up. But
don't doubt what Phil Handy can do in an off season.
Stretch that fella out. All right, so there is one last thing about the sort of the rotation. We one guy that we've been talking about a lot is Cam Reddish, and I have a one bone to pick with the idea completely.
Okay.
What?
I just went to Phil Handy's Instagram, and this is the real one, the real 94 feet of game. This is right. Phil Handy's. Phil Handy posted a picture of himself with Jared Vanderbilt. And it says, # the work is real. Jay Vando got taller since the season ended. Eyeball emojis.
I'm still not buying. I'm going to need to see actual measurements. Look, if they measure him out and he's an inch taller, great. But
we need the X-Files music. This is really.
I'm intrigued by this, not even from a basketball standpoint, because I'm not entirely sure how much of a difference it would make. But I am just intrigued at the idea that a 24-year-old is getting taller with the Lakers. But there is an assumption that Cam Reddish is all upside and doesn't matter. I want to question that at least a little bit. And also, somebody asked a great question about Austin Reaves on the YouTube channel that I want to address. We'll do all that next. So, Andy, this question, we talked on Thursday's show about Austin Reaves playing with the World Cup team and what that looks like. And, it's kind of cool and what an achievement that was for him. We did get a question today from McLeod Tormund, which is just a spectacular name on the YouTube channel. How worried should we be about fatigue for Austin? I think most fans remember that during the playoffs, he did seem to, there was a moment in the regular season where he kind of seemed to hit a bit of a wall and push through it. there was a moment in the playoffs, certainly against Golden State, where it looked like, man, Reaves is just cooked. He's real tired. He obviously pushed through it, but this is a guy that the Lakers are going to be relying on to play a ton of minutes. I think of all these sort of supporting dudes on the roster, the one that you can look at and say is going to pile up minutes, could very well lead the team in minutes this year, I think, is Austin Reaves. It would not shock me in the slightest if, given how they want to preserve the other two guys, LeBron and AD, that Austin Reaves actually played more minutes than anybody.
It wouldn't be shocking. I mean, he is a prime guy to look to soak up minutes if possible. You know, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it wouldn't surprise me if post-trade deadline, Austin Reaves was one of the leaders in minutes on the team, if not led the team. A, because he's young, and B, so many other guys were hurt anyway. So he became a natural guy that you started leaning on a lot over the course of the season. And he's somebody that you're going to be looking to lean on because you want him to get better anyway. You want him to start taking real steps and real strides. And a lot of that comes with just being on the court. And as you've talked about a lot, I think it's true. By the way, March and April, he was averaging about 32 minutes.
32 minutes. He played 30 and a half in March and 34 a game in April.
Yeah. I mean, you've talked
the
about
Lakers, just for reference, would like to keep both Anthony Davis and LeBron James in the low 30s if they can.
He is somebody that fits with a lot of different lineups and a lot of different looks. That in and of itself can get you a lot of playing time.
Mm-hmm. So how concerned are you with that combined with, okay, he's going to be playing some intense basketball with Team USA this offseason in terms of meaningful fatigue?
I mean, it's something that the Lakers do need to be cognizant of. They need to be aware of it, and they need to be, I think, making sure that they are monitoring the work that he is doing or the recovery that he's doing in between Team USA and when camp starts. And I hope that they go out of their way to make sure that they're telling him things that he ought to be doing. Mm-hmm. You know, that they're really on top of it. That being said, like, you can't have this both ways. Like, you can't want him to get this type of experience. You can't want him to really gain this sort of not just prestige, but like responsibility and accountability and feel like he is becoming a true NBA player and then worry that he's playing too much. You know what I mean? Like this is part of the deal when it comes to players gaining stature. They, you know, Kobe used to play in the off seasons with, you know, Team USA in 2008, 2012. You know, Melo was like a fixture. You know, these are all guys that played. LeBron did it all the time. Wade did it all the time. Durant. These are all guys that were heavy minute guys with their teams with big responsibilities, and they still carved out time for this.
Yeah, and it's also too, it's like, in theory, this makes him a better player. So like the experience improves Reaves and makes him better, playing around better players. Big, you know, I think he's going to play a leadership role here and get a lot of floor time. I'm not too worried about it, because the other thing about it is he would be playing a ton of basketball anyway. You know, he'd be doing a lot of work. This is harder. It's more travel. It's, you know, it is probably more taxing when it's all said and done.
I'm sure it is.
But I don't think, not to the point where you would say the trade-off isn't worth it. So, but it was an interesting question, I thought, from McLeod, because it's like, you think about LeBron, you think about AD, you don't think as much about the younger guys, but the younger guys get tired too, especially the ones who you're going to be asking to do, like, and he plays like, he's not playing floaty minutes where, you know, like not all 32-minute stints are created equal. The 32 minutes that he plays, where he's constantly drawing contact and getting hit in the face and all these other things, are harder than other 30-minute stints that other guys might be playing.
Look, we talked about this during his rookie year. We talked about it during a period last year in the playoffs against Golden State. It looked at times like Reaves had hit a wall, and he even admitted his first season in the league was an adjustment from college. Second season in the league was an adjustment from having not made the playoffs the season before and having his minutes go up. So this is all, again, part of the process of becoming hopefully a high-end NBA player.
Let me run, before we quit here, let me run this by you. The general perception is that Cam Reddish doesn't matter, in the sense that if he is not the player the Lakers need him to be, or hope he could be, emerges, finally clicks, whatever it is. Doesn't matter because they're not paying him much and he's not currently really expected to be in the rotation anyway. There is a depth question with the Lakers. I think they have a much better balanced roster. I think they have better depth than they had last year. I don't think it's really debatable, but they are operating with one less sort of active roster spot. If you consider Hood Schifino to be kind of a development player, guy that you're not really counting on to give you minutes this year, you have him and Max Lewis on your roster who are not expected to give you minutes. Last year, they only carried one of those guys. It was Christie. Everybody else on the roster was there to theoretically play. It was just a matter of figuring out who was actually going to be able to.
Yes and no. I don't think they necessarily expected Juan Toscano-Anderson to play a ton of minutes. Like he could have been a viable option.
I think when they signed him, he was in the same bucket as a lot of these other guys going, yeah, we could. I don't think they knew what they were going to get out of him. I don't think they knew what they were going to get out of Troy Brown. I think they needed the regular season in the training camp to sort some of those things out. I think there was we did shows like where there was a legitimate, where we talked through real possibilities of Toscano-Anderson playing, 15 minutes a night, 16 minutes, whatever it is. It was a live option, I think.
No, sure. I understand that. But what I'm saying is I think there's an expectation when you head into the season that assuming you're good and the main guys start filling their roles, somebody's going to be on the outside looking in no matter what. Like, I don't think they know, for example, how rock solid is Damian Jones, because Damian Jones was not really a proven player. He had a good year with Sacramento, but Damian Jones has bounced around the league for a reason. You know what I mean? Like Anderson on good teams typically didn't play much.
But my point is, I don't think they knew who the good players were. Like, I don't think they knew last year as well as this year as to who those guys were that were going to fill in the fabric, which is part of the reason the rotation was kind of fluid, I think, throughout the year. If, let's say, Christie hits and is the guy that looks like he could be, where you're like, okay, he's going to step in and kind of fill the, if you had an extra player in Lonnie Walker and Malik Beasley and, Troy Brown and whatever, Christie can step up and be that guy. And it doesn't matter if let's say Christie isn't quite ready or somebody else gets hurt or something like that. I do think it is just because they're playing with one less player that they are, potentially looking to. I think Reddish could matter a little bit more than we're maybe giving it credit. I don't think you don't want it to be that way, but I'm just saying I'm not entirely by this idea that he won't matter at all. And then when you look at the forward rotation, I don't see, there's not a clear path to him to ramp up and sort of develop the playing time that he could do. So, when we did that scouting report, one of the things that always came up was whenever he got on the floor, if he felt like this was his only shot, he would do star things to try to get more playing time. It makes me just wonder how well suited, like you talk about that sort of mental shift that he might have to go through. It's going to be critically important that he do it because he may not have a lot of opportunities to play, and the instinct to go be a star is almost surely going to be the wrong instinct when he gets on the floor.
I mean, if that's his instinct, then it's not likely going to work out here, and he may very well have a difficult time staying in the NBA. As far as the concern about, if Christie doesn't hit, will Reddish fit in a suitable role or whatever? I mean, it's something that matters, but I got to be honest, assuming the other guys are playing the way you want them to, your fourth guard does matter, but it's not something I'm necessarily losing a ton of sleep over. If other guys aren't working out, then frankly, how well your fourth guy is playing also probably doesn't matter.
Right, but it's like this idea, that he's, it could, like, if it's not, he could end up being in a situation where they need some production out of him. And so, like, in the same way that, it's one of the reasons I would love for them to sign a higher floor player if they can find one.
I tend to feel
that 14th spot.
I tend to feel like if they need production from Cam Reddish, there's probably a lot of things going wrong. That's my general thought on this. I mean, frankly, if they need a ton of production from Christie, things are likely not going well. The 14th spot is a different thing because that's somebody you're projecting to not just play, but you're not sure they have that guy because that 14th spot is a big man and they're low on bigs.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a totally different
it's just an interest. To me, it was just something that popped out to me. Like, when you think about the depth on the team, which again, I think is better, it is more balanced. I like this team much better than last year's. It is just one of those deals where it's like they are kind of operating with one less live player, I think, this year than last. You might disagree depending on what you think about Toscano Anderson or whatever. But I think when you look at what they were thinking last year at this time, I think whatever all bets were on, whatever all bets were off, whatever it is. But it's just something I was thinking about in relation to Reddish. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see. I just don't believe that he is taller, Andy. I'm not buying.
I just want people to see this Instagram post from, again, the real Phil Handy, the real 94 feet game. Hashtag the work is real. Jay Vando got taller since the season ended. Eyeball emojis. I
mean, look, those if you told me that the shorts he was wearing in that photo at the end of the season were like an inch above his knee, I'd be really stoked because they're much shorter now.
If you want to call Phil Handy a liar or a fool, that's fine.
I'm gonna need to see some more evidence. But I love the idea of Lakers getting taller in the offseason.
Max Christie apparently grew, according to
but Max Christie is 11 years old. He can still get taller.
Yes,
Hood Schifino can get taller. All those guys, but LeBron can't get taller at this point. LeBron can only shrink.
Yeah,
like us or our dad. All right, Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show, hang out. Andy, you are headed out on vacation, well earned. So I'll have some guests coming in next week. So leave us names. I do have a couple open spots toward the end of the week. If there's people that you guys want to see, let me know. I'll try to book them. And we'll see everybody on Monday.